That's it. Really like to thank you for this opportunity. This is incredible that you are both here. Your impact on video games is huge, and this is something that is evident with games today. And I will come back to that later, because one of the things we try to do at the Cyprus Computer Museum is encourage more girls to get into video game development, and they need more role models. So the fact that we have tonight one of the major storytellers in video game history, I mean, this is amazing, and thank you. This is, I say this a lot in every interview, but when you're interviewing Roberta and Ken Williams, when we're interviewing you, Ron Gilbert, David Fox, I mean, there is nothing else to say. So thank you for this, for your time.
Well, we're very happy that there are people keeping the history alive, because we have our memories and we've written some of it down, but there's nothing quite like getting people while they're still around to talk about the earlier days
and keep it going.
Yes.
Keep the love going.
I actually on the 24th of August, of January, sorry, that's the birthday of the Imaginary, actually. On the 24th of August, I'm presenting a free Creative Commons ebook I'm writing on the history of video games and video game consoles, and definitely your games are going there, and I'll be more than glad to send you my drafts to get your feedback. It's going to be free to download, and there's nothing. I mean, I'm doing it because it's something that I love, and I think we should put it out there.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, if I may ask, I mean, you're one of the pioneers in the video game industry. You started when the industry was really creating the genres of the adventure games, the animated adventure games. So before you started working on your first games at Sierra, may I ask, what was it that inspired you to work on game design and storytelling for games?
Well, we met over a D&D game, a Dungeons and Dragons game. So we've been playing Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing type games for a long time.
Yeah, I was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons in around 1975. I took a year off school to work, and during that I started finding out about, actually this was 76, I found the Dungeons and Dragons version on Plato, University of Illinois Plato computer system, which was an amazing computer-assisted instruction system. And that got me into meeting people in multiple places across the United States and in Canada who were Dungeons and Dragons players. And I wrote my own module called The Tower of Indomitable Circumstance, tongue twister, which was published by Judges Guild. And I was demonstrating that at a science fiction convention in San Francisco when I met Lori and dragged her into the game.
The advantage of Dungeons and Dragons over all the games we played as children is that there are no losers in Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody's a winner, and everybody's having a moment of creativity and feeling empowered by a good D&D game. And that's the kind of thing that, really I enjoyed. And it's really what I wanted to do, and to bring that and to share that joy with other people, which is why I was a dungeon master and eventually got into the computer games, because computer games at that time did not have the feel or the impression that I was, that I wanted to get from a game.
Yeah, I would actually say the word rather than can't lose, because you can die your character can die in a role-playing game, and then you make another character. But it is a cooperative game. Everyone works together as a team. Even the dungeon master, in good games anyway, is not an antagonist. The dungeon master, presents challenges and paints a picture of the world, but it is collaborative storytelling. Everybody is working together. And so that's the spirit that we tried to bring into our games, is that we're telling a story, but the story is not complete until the player becomes part of it.
Yes, because as game designers, we don't know how the player will play the game. So therefore, we have to give the player the chance to try things and experiment and let the player drive the way the game is played.
So as far as being pioneers, in a sense, yes, but I would say we were actually in the second generation of computer games, because they started around the early to mid 70s and got into the game, so to speak, in the late 80s. 1988 is when I went to work for Sierra. And we played some of the early computer games, and we were inspired by part of it, and other places we said, we can do better than this. And it was actually a wonderful timing thing for us that we came in right at the point where the text and the music and the sound and the graphics were all coming together so that you could make more immersive experiences. So we played Dungeon Master and Wizardry. Wizardry was one of the earliest 3D wireframe Dungeons and Dragons type games. And that was actually inspired by a game that Robert Woodhead had encountered on Play-Doh, same place where I found it. And the other one were text adventure games such as Colossal Cave Adventure and Zork. That was, told wonderful stories and puzzles and text, but didn't have the immersive graphics. And so that all started to come together in the late 80s.
Yeah. Since you're now with Dungeons and Dragons and actually reading a book about Gigax and how he created the whole phenomenon of that, I'm still in the early parts of the book. If I remember correctly, Richard Garriott, the creator of the Ultima series, originally worked at Sierra. I think.
Okay, so his first game, Richard Garriott, who called himself Lord British, wrote his first games as a high school student. I don't remember the name of the first ones, but he then self-published, or actually, I'm sorry, Ultima 1 he published through a West Coast United States company, and was very excited about that. And then Sierra Online came in and offered to publish Ultima 2, and that was one of the major. That was the first real foray into role-playing games by Sierra, and Richard felt like he wasn't getting enough from them, so then he started Origin Systems for the rest of the series. But his second game, Akalabeth, was his original high school title. So those were his early games. I think the first one was written in BASIC, possibly.
That's interesting.
Might have been assembly language, but I think it was BASIC. And then that led to us. So that was what was that?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyway, so about 10 years later, Ken Williams said, we really had a big hit with Ultima 2, and we lost it. I wonder if we can recreate that magic. And that's when he brought Lori and me in to try to recreate the magic of Sierra doing a role-playing game.
But unfortunately, we could not make an Ultima style game. It wasn't the system that Sierra has down was a really, really good system. It had a good basic programming language and framework for creating games, but it did not have the right framework for doing an Ultima game. And it did have the right framework for doing the adventure role-playing games that we came up with.
Yes. Well, I remember playing the first game of the series on my Atari ST, and if I remember correct, Mr. Cole, you're the one who programmed that, right?
Yes.
With a team. I was one of the programmers. I was the lead programmer, but we had a team of 5 people, 5 programmers. But we had, so we had very divergent, upbringings and backgrounds before we came to Sierra. Lori was a school teacher, and university she studied creative writing, and art and teaching.
Animation.
And, she took a college class in in hand-drawn animation. And then I had grown up as a mathematics and computer science, but fascinated. We both loved fantasy and science fiction books and movies, and we both loved games of all kinds, and especially role-playing games when we discovered them in college. So we came in there with a creative right brain, art side background, and a left brain analytical in mathematics and computer science background. And we were able to work together to have everything we needed for a computer game. So you never know what life experience you have that are going to turn out to be really valuable for a later career. We didn't get into games until we were 30.
Okay, but I remember I was very captivated with the original story of the first game, and it was a huge departure from Sierra games. Obviously, we had the animated character, but also the action scenes. The fact that we could select the class of our hero, and we start from scratch, and then we build its attributes. I mean, that was a huge departure from anything else that Sierra did, and I don't quite think that they did anything similar since then. I mean, every game had a specific hero, and that's it, which is quite nice based on the story. So the main question is, obviously you blended that and it was perfect. But how did you really manage to pull it through? I mean, you've got the thief that only comes at night and they can enter homes, and you've got the warrior. And how complex was that to create such a diverse game with all the characters back then? I mean, you had limited power compared to what we've got today.
We were told at the time we were insane, having 3 different character classes. And different puzzles for each, and perhaps it was an incredibly ambitious set of projects, set of games.
Well, when we came in, we were trying to model it after a D&D game and after the other previous role-playing games like Wizardry and that, where you had a variety of characters you could choose to play. And when we came to Sierra, initially I had elves. You could play an elf and a centaur and things like that. And then I hit my head against the realities that the computers of the era could not handle my ambitions. Yeah. So slowly I had to whittle it down, the idea that all the animation had to fit on one little disc in addition to everything else. Everything was driven by the fact that the computers just couldn't do what I wanted to do. So I had to adapt. And that's why we wound up with the characters, 3 different characters. They're all dressed the same. But their behavior, is different only because the player puts it into them.
So we were very lucky when we were doing tabletop role-playing to have some great dungeon masters and other players playing along with us that gave us the idea that this doesn't have to just be going out and killing monsters and looting their treasure, that there can actually be story in there, and there can actually be puzzles and plot lines. So we brought all that in, and we had developed our own Dungeons and Dragons like tabletop system that we had played just a very small number of games with friends, and that was the core of the system that became Heroes Quest. So we were basically trying to bring our tabletop experiences onto the screen, and as you say, the tools were limited, but they weren't bad, because Sierra's adventure games were storytelling games with animation and with background pictures behind them, and we were able to leverage that technology and then add in our own layer of the role-playing systems and these character abilities and the skill system, and build that on top of the graphic adventure system to make a true hybrid that was both an adventure game and a role-playing game.
But that's amazing. I mean, all the details that come from Dungeons and Dragons, and you try to cram it into the computers and storage of the 80s. This is one of the things that the younger generation today, with they are used to games of 50, 60, 100 gigabytes. They really cannot realize what it meant back then to cram a game on just one floppy disk. I mean, that's amazing.
Well, we didn't manage that either. I think it was 9 floppies for our first game, which was ridiculous. Sierra normally had 2 floppies for a game, and the management was not pleased when they added up the materials costs for shipping a game with our games. They actually, but they went with it. We actually had both 5 1/4 inch and 3 1/2 inch floppies in the same, box, totally crammed full.
Yeah.
And that's how we were able to get the PC version and the Atari ST and Macintosh and Amiga versions all into the same box. And that was actually my first job at Sierra. They didn't hire me to make a game initially. They hired me to modify their system, which they called SCI, so that games written for the PC would also work on the Atari ST. And so I did the Atari ST interpreter and modified the whole system. So it was very important from the start to be compatible with all those different computers that were out there.
Effectively, it was the Wild West of computer eras. There were no real standards. Everything had to be invented from scratch. But Sierra had a nice little niche that they had created, and we fit into it really well.
Yeah, in the 70s, there were about 70s to 80s, there were about at least 20, maybe as many as 100 competing graphics card standards. Dozens of sound cards. So yeah, you never knew what monstrous hobgoblin of a computer our players would be on.
Yes, and exactly that's the point where you actually created the rules as you went along with that, and that's one of the I think that's one of the legacies that you have in the video games industry, and this is exactly what this set of interviews in the ebook are trying to show, that these are the people who actually created the technologies we take today for granted, and back then they had to invent everything while creating the game itself. So yeah, that was that's amazing. That's amazing.
I want to say two important lessons that I learned right at the beginning. Lesson 1 is you can't do it alone. It takes a team. So, nobody is the greatest artist, the greatest programmer, the greatest writer, the greatest musician in the world. You need a team, and everybody contributes part of it. And the second is that if you want to make a game, don't start out making a game. Start out with one tiny little piece. Get that working and then build up from there. My mentor at Sierra, Bob Heitman, when I first started doing the Atari ST interpreter, and it seemed like incredibly hard job. How do I do that? He said, draw 1 pixel on the screen. When you can draw 1 pixel at a place that you choose, then you can go from there to draw a sprite, and then you can go from there to animate that sprite and get it moving. But the first step is to get 1 pixel on the screen.
Okay.
So that's the way you make a huge computer game, is you do it 1 piece of code, 1 scene, 1 line of dialogue to start with, and from there you build up. So
this is very, very interesting, because some of the people that are watching our videos with the interviews are game developers, and 2 of my closest friends, Vicky and Elena, are 2 young girls who've got their own software company, and I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of this interview about how you develop the game and how you write the story for the game. I think this is very important. So you've got. So to go back to how the first game in the series came to be. So they told you that you're crazy to try to do something like that, but
not at Sierra. Everybody else in the industry.
Okay, everybody else, yeah, okay.
I had no clue what we were doing. Basically, Sierra put us in a room with a team and said, "Go for it." And they threw me into it. I hadn't been a teacher. I had never been a team leader of a bunch of adults, and let alone a bunch of programmers, which notoriously cannot be led any more than you can lead cats. But so I was trying to, learn on the job of how to schedule things, how to get things done. Every day was an improvisation, trying to adapt to the situation.
So I had worked in a number of different things, even before becoming a programmer. As a bookkeeper for my father's company, but I had gotten some very early project scheduling software and had used it because I did an indie project to put a desktop publishing system on the Atari ST through Antic Software. You may remember them. I had an article in Start Magazine, which is their Atari ST magazine. So I knew something about project scheduling. I knew something about, working with a small team. But, we were really thrown into it. Lori had the title of director, and director meant that she, at Sierra, meant that she was writing all the dialogue. She was leading the team. She was managing the artists. She was telling the musicians what to do. And there's nobody that has all those qualifications, but she was expected to. So that's why the two of us working together. There's the same story on the Space Quest game from Sierra that Mark Crow and Scott Murphy worked together on that one. And Scott was the programmer and Mark was the artist. And I believe they're both musicians. So, they brought all the pieces together that way.
Yeah, the teams are everything. But Sierra management really just said, okay, go do it. Here's your corner, do it. And they didn't know what we were doing. And of course, we barely knew what we were doing because we had to, adapt to everything. So basically, we made this game, and it wasn't until it was almost done that the management finally could take a look at it, because the problem with computer games is that they are horrible until they're almost done. You can't look at them. They're, with no sound and everything, they're dreadfully dull. You have no clue. You're all doing this in your head as a designer because you can't see the end product until everything finally fits together. All the music is there. The voice, the deck, the programming is there, and suddenly it comes to life. And Sierra took one look at it, and they had no clue what this game was. And in fact, we were told the reason our game wasn't canceled was because Ken Williams' son played the game and said, "Oh, this is really cool." So I think we were saved by Ken Williams' son from obscurity, because he realized what the fun of it was, because, management couldn't tell.
Yeah, the other important lesson is never underestimate the importance of luck. That things happen, and I liked the analogy of the old carousels of the wooden horses that went around. And back in the Depression, they would have a machine that had a bar sticking out outside of the carousel with brass rings on it. And if you were really brave, you could stand up on top of your carousel horse and try to grab one of the brass rings as you went by it. Very dangerous. They wouldn't allow it today. But that led to the expression, grab the brass ring. And that's what we did when we went to Sierra, is that we had a house in another city. We had a baby son, and we had to, sell our house and move to the mountains with a job that we didn't know if it would last a month. And I said, well, that was my grabbing the brass ring, as we took the chance because we loved games and we wanted to do something like this.
Yeah. So the luck was that we were the right people for the job, but the it takes the willingness to reach for that
and take a chance.
and take that chance. Life is a lot of chances and a lot of possibilities, and you just have to sometimes, say, yes, I'm going to take that chance.
Wow.
So
This is amazing. And of course, by reading Sierra's story, at some point, Ken and Roberta, they had to mortgage their own house just to keep the company alive. So, I mean, you also took a huge risk by doing what you did. And fortunately for us who played your games, we are very thankful that you took that risk. Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. And I don't even know what I was going to say something about here. Question. It's fine.
May I ask something about Mr. Laurie? You said that you had a lot of obligations in the company. Of course, Sierra was not a common company because usually they're male dominated. But Sierra, you've got Roberta Williams there. Was the environment of the company more acceptable to women having a leading role?
Clearly they were, because of Roberta, because there was no company of Sierra Online without Roberta, because she was the driving force behind it. Her creativity and her belief that she could tell a story was why the games and the whole company was formed. So given that Roberta could do it, they didn't have the prejudice going in against women being in position of power. And in fact, Roberta, we had a lot of women that were working in this company, and quite famous game designers as a result came out of it. There was
Christy Marks, who was a successful Hollywood animator
and comic book writer.
And yes. Comic book writer, did the Conquests series, and then Jane Jensen came along and did Gabriel Knight. First, she worked on a King's Quest. She was the ghostwriter behind one of the King's Quests. Gano Hain and Jane Jensen collaborated on EcoQuest. So quite a few women. Did Lorelei Shannon?
She did. She wrote. She went with Phantasmagoria. She did.
Okay, and then and the other woman that Tammy Dargan did the Police Quest SWAT, and
so yes, there were a lot of women in the professional positions at Sierra and doing the design, because they didn't have any prejudice, knowing that this is where they get their games.
Now, on the development side, it was a little more striated. Most of the programmers were men. There were one or two women. Most of the artists, artists were both, but there were more women than men.
There were actually more men.
Okay, but there were a lot of women artists. Not very many women programmers. Yeah. But the game designers, the team directors, often were women.
Yeah. And that was a big difference from almost every other company out there, because yes, there were a lot of rumors of other companies being very male dominated and dismissive of women. So it was an era when there was a lot of prejudice. Nowadays, people know women can pretty much do this stuff.
Yes, today's more acceptable.
Look at fantasy novels, you'll see an awful lot of them are written by women. Marion Zimmer Bradley, Mercedes Lackey, who we knew from science fiction conventions, Julie Eckler, also that there are all kinds of, a lot of the fantasy fiction is being written by women, and always has been. And so it makes sense that games can be written by women too.
May I ask another? I mean, it's one of the. It's you had a very balanced game as far as the narrative you had and the limitations from a technical point. Were there any major? Of course, you already mentioned that you had to scale down a lot of your initial thoughts. What was probably the biggest compromise you had in the creation of the original game based on the limitations of the technology of the era?
Well, basically, yes. We had started out, I had started out the game design with Corey was working on the Atari ST stuff. So I was the one that was presenting as the designer. We were not going to be working as a team. We were going to be working separately. And so therefore I came in and I proposed a game that was basically similar to what it became, because really I did not come with a fully game proposal with everything set up. I came with a game proposal that showed what the characters would be and the progression that we wanted to go. So there were 4 different characters. You could play a centaur, archer, a gnome thief, an elf something or other, and then your hero was a human with big muscles.
I think it was the elf magic user and the human warrior.
That was it. And so came in so that the character types that you play in D&D sort of thing would be matched by different character bodies and things like that. So it would look very different depending on who you played.
And a very important thing is we wanted the player to be able to play as either a male or a female character.
Yeah.
So I'd say that was the biggest thing we lost.
Oh, yeah, well, we could never get that.
For either the different races or for the male and female, they said for every piece of animation the character does, if they reach forward to open a door or they swing a sword, they said you'd have to duplicate that animation for a male and a female character. That would double the amount of animation in the game. And as you said, we were on floppy disks initially. Many players did not have hard drives yet at that time, which meant that if you had a character, the fighter character swinging a sword, you had to duplicate that animation on every floppy disk.
Wow.
And the PC floppy disk only had 360,000 bytes of information. So about a third of the disk, possibly more, was taken up with things that had to be on every single disk. And that only allowed, somewhere between half and 2/3 of the disk for the actual scenes of the game. So anything that you added that went into that has to be on every disk part, cut into how many scenes you could have in the game and what you could do.
And I had gone into Sierra. I wasn't sure whether or not they were going to buy on this, but so the first game was, I wanted to put as much stuff into it as possible. And so I had an idea where the story was going. And I knew I wanted to try to sell it to Sierra, I wanted to sell it to the idea that this is a familiar place that role players could feel comfortable going into. So it was drawing upon, the Germanic fairy tale lands, like the Brothers Grimm and that sort of stories, that the player would feel comfortable knowing some of the tropes, knowing what they were to expect. And so then we could throw them into, the strangeness in that. I did propose it as a series, and I wanted to take the player on a wild adventure. And I wanted the player to feel like this is my world. I am here. This is me. That's why the characters we have in the game, the main character that you play doesn't say anything, because I wanted the player to be that character, to project into that character what he would say, what he would speak. And I didn't want to break that illusion by having the main character say something stupid and say, oh my gosh, I would never have done that or said that. It was letting the player be in control. And so this was an approach that I don't think anybody else had tried before. To give player autonomy, yes.
No, I would say that no. The way you build the characters, and it's quite the opposite from the 2 guys from Andromeda did with Space Quest, where they ridicule Roger Wilk all the time.
That's the other thing is, since we're making the main character be you, we do not want to insult you or put you down. So therefore, what the whole game tries to do is build you up and give you the experiences of actually, making a difference in other people's lives and feel like that you've really feel like you've done something when you come to the end of the game.
So your narrator is kind of the hero's internal voice and gets to make all the jokes and the puns and so on. And even though we both always loved puns, we didn't write the first ones. We had a program in the team, Bob Fishbach, who had worked on Police Quest. I don't know if he'd been on a King's Quest or not, but he was our experienced team member. And he prototyped the first scene of the game, which was just outside the gates of Spielberg. And he had a look at message for one of the trees that made some pun about it. And, Lori and I looked at each other and say, "You mean we can have puns in our game?"
Yeah. I mean, we were going to do a serious fantasy, high fantasy game. But first of all, one of our artists was more cartoony. And the more cartoony throws off the serious tone. And so all it was we're adapting to the situation. It meant that, all right, if it's going to be more cartoony, we can have more humor in it. And I could, have the Baba Yaga character be a very funny character and an interesting thing, because really it's about storytelling and really making the players, get to experience and enjoy as they go along. So
we started out writing The Hobbit, and it ended up turning into either a Discworld or a Spell for Chameleon.
References most people won't get, but turned into Disney,
went from serious to silly very quickly early in the development, which is another rule is be flexible. Sometimes your story will tell you where it wants to go.
And make the best use of the people and the resources you have. So because we had a great programmer who knew how to make jokes and things, and because we had an artist who was making things a little more cartoony, and then eventually, and then we had Jerry Moore, who was an animated genius in terms of how funny he could make things look and feel. So therefore, we go with a flow, we adapt to that and make that part of the game. And that was our, from then on, our series took that premise and flew with it.
Jerry Moore was also a Star Trek fan. If you look at say, Moby Games and look at the list of games that he worked on, you'll find that every one of those games has a Starship Enterprise hidden somewhere in the game.
Wow. Wow. I love that. I really love that. How was the reception of the game? I mean, once the game got out and people started buying it, I'm quite sure the management realized that their initial reaction was completely wrong.
Yes, initially they said, "Okay, fine, you've got this game. We're going to give you something else to do. We make sure that our games are spread out. It wouldn't be the next year. The next game would be something different."
Series games were always every second year.
Yeah.
So 1 month after our game was on the shelves, the general manager of the company came over to me and looked at me and said, "Well, we have our first sales figures in." And so I was, ready for disappointment. He says, "This is the highest number of sales we've ever had in the first month of a game." And at which point he said, "We want you to start on the second game."
Yeah.
Wow. Try by fire.
The press was very favorable towards it. It was amazing. And as we said, 2 months before the game was ready, it didn't feel like the game was close to ready because we didn't have any of the music in there. And when Mark Siebert came in and wrote the score for it, and all the music and sound came in, all of a sudden we were in a living world instead of a set of pictures on the screen.
Yeah.
So nobody could tell.
But music is an important part of games, and my previous interview with Mr. Robert Holmes. And we discussed exactly, we focused on how music makes a game come to life. And this is amazing. And actually, Sierra were pioneers in the audio department. I remember the first time I played King's Quest IV, my Atari ST connected to a MIDI keyboard, and we were really blown away by the sound that was actually coming out from that game, it was amazing.
Yeah, I did the sound system for the Atari ST and the MIDI system for it, but the making sure that all the music worked on so many, and we said the Wild West in terms of graphics cards. Music cards, you had the original IBM PC, had a single voice,
Yes.
square wave sound, beeps and boops, people called it. And they had to do something that would sound okay on that. Then you had the Tandy 1000 from Radio Shack that had 3 voices. I think the Atari ST had 4, and then you had the MIDI devices. Ken Williams had the idea of bundling Roland MT32 sound device with some of their games early on, which is interesting. A $300 device with a $50 game. But yeah, they were really cared about getting the music right. Stuart Goldstein at Sierra was the technical whiz behind all that, and made sure that all the music worked no matter what your sound device was.
It was. I remember playing the King's Quest 2 on the Atari ST, and I fell in love with it the first moment I saw that. Actually, the 2 reasons I bought an Atari ST was, first of all, I saw Star Trek running on my friend's Atari ST, and I said, okay, I'm getting this computer. And after a friend of mine bought King's Quest 2, but he didn't like adventure games. So he showed it to me. I said, oh my God, I need to have that. And one of the first games I got, he actually gave that to me when I got my Atari ST, and I was really into adventure games. But coming back to your games, it was a serious departure from anything else. I mean, if I take the animated adventure games from Sierra, King's Quest, Space Quest, even Larry or Police Quest, they have a similar feeling, but Quest for Glory is, I mean, you expanded that with the RPG genre. And what I always considered is that I'm also a fan of the Japanese RPG games, but I think it's very hard to find something that could blend the storytelling of the Quest for Glory games with what came later. And I think even Sierra couldn't make it. I mean, the final official King's Quest game, which was a 3D game and a bit controversial, even though I liked it, I have to admit I liked it. It had an action RPG element, but there was something missing that you had it in your game. I always felt that the Quest games, they have a very cohesive story there, and it was the story driving everything else instead of let's do a 3D RPG. Yeah.
So we were always, carefully balancing, and a lot of it was luck, but we had to make sure that the story was basically serious, and Laurie had, a storyline the player was following, and that, really had some very dire and dark aspects to it. The daughter and son of the Baron were both missing. Everything is wrong in this valley, and you need to help fix it. But at the same time, we had the jokes in there. So we like to think of it that most serious Hollywood movies do the same thing. They have some humor in there to kind of lighten the mood occasionally in what's otherwise a very serious story. So we were always trying to work on the balance between serious story and silly reactions to things. That is kind of like our hero is a little flippant. He doesn't take anything seriously.
Well, not so much the first games. Remember, that's more our later games get it. But
it got worse in Hero.
Yeah, it got a lot worse. But our approach to the games always was to treat this as an overarching story, that the whole series was one story, and each of these were books in the series. So I thought of them as a book series, and you'd have to have each game had to come to a satisfying conclusion while giving the player a roller coaster ride to get to that end. So I was very much story oriented, and we'd taken a course in how to do screenplays and that after the fact, because
that was about
certainly didn't know
the third
this
game or so.
Right, didn't know this going in, but the more we read about how they did games, how they wrote scripts for movies, that we started incorporating in it too. So we learned as we went, but always the story was the critical thing, trying to get it to actually be to create this world that you could believe in, that things were consistent, that you understood, the ground rules, and you felt comfortable in this world, even when we threw you into places where you had no prior experience. Like we threw you into Africa and you had to learn the cultures of the people around you. You couldn't just, go in there and be the mighty hero. You had to adapt to the world you were in. And then we threw you again into the world of Moldavia, where nobody trusts you and nobody knows where you came from. And they all are really careful, and because it's a dangerous place. And you have to learn how to get these people to like you and teach them that you are a great person. And all that time, the player is really feeling like this is part of their experience. And I think
we've had people tell us that, in their travels, they've come across things and said, oh, I saw that in the game. And storytelling wise, when people learn about Baba Yaga in literature, they say, oh, didn't Corey Laurie invent that? I'm only 2,000 years old.
Right. And basically, we did our research on each place we went to. We wanted to really bring in the local mythologies and the stories that were around that place to get the player like he's going on a worldwide trip and getting to experience these places and this past and that.
And of course, we want to bring the whole series together so the player ends up in the ultimate paradise, of course, which is the Greek Isles.
Yes.
Because that's the best place on earth there is. So that was where the final game was set. We've never been there, though.
As a teacher, I must say that I encourage my students. I'm a primary school teacher. And even though we've got the language barrier with Greek speakers, I encourage them to play adventure games, especially some of the remakes that they can find online, because they've got great storytelling. So you practice your reading skills, your understanding, and of course you're interacting that. So you're part of the story. You have to solve the puzzles to get along. So this to me, it's not just an entertainment. It's something that's really helping you understand the story and be part of the story and help the story progress. So the adventure game genre for me, it's something that can be considered educational. I don't like the term edutainment, although the companies they took entertainment as a way to convince parents to get something for your children. I don't really like the majority of entertainment titles. But I think games like Quest for Glory, even though there is a bit of violence, but not that can be very disturbing, I think that they've got that educational value because you're really being part of a story that's progressing, that's educational. And as you said, I mean, you did research. So somebody visits a place in the game and you learn something about the mythology and the fairy tales and the stories. And that's part of a legacy it's a lot of times it's disregarded. Of course, as the school teachers, we can understand that and we can cherish that.
When we were actually making these games, they started to get distributed around the world, and we would get people that were learning English from them, especially the ones that actually had the voice acting. It was very easy for them to read along and learn how to speak, or they learned how to type. Half of our people learned how to type on the early games because, you had to type in these responses. But they also, a lot of people were inspired by our games. We have lots of fans that wrote us over the years of what a difference it made in their lives. And particularly at the time, there was still the Soviet Union. There was the bloc that all of the Central European countries were literally blocked off from Europe because they were under the Soviet Union from Western Europe. And our games would be pirated over there. And, because they couldn't get our games directly.
It was illegal to sell American computers or games in the Soviet bloc countries. But we had someone write to us from Ukraine. And this is, 30 years ago, he wrote to us saying that he learned English from our games, and they gave him a sense of hope, particularly Quest for Glory 2, which has the kind of the West and the East represented in the two cities. He said that while the communists were making life hell for us, that these games gave him hope that there can be heroes and that individuals can do things that matter.
That has always been our theme in all of the games.
It's all about heroes.
It's all about being a hero and learning how to be a hero and making a difference in the world around you.
Yes, and having said that, I mean, the phrase, so you want to be a hero, that's not a question. That's a challenge. A challenge. You want to be a hero.
And it's kind of ironic. It's the idea is, being a hero is nasty business. You're going to, be in very dangerous situations. You're going to have a lot of trouble, but it is worthwhile. It's a worthwhile pursuit. So it does challenge and ask the question, you really want to be a hero? Well, let's find out.
If I may, from what you do, I mean, your post-Sierra work, you're still following your interest with role-playing games. So you continued working with role-playing games with great stories. And in recent years, you've got the Hero U games, which can be seen as successors to Quest for Glory, right?
In a way, yes.
Yeah, we call it spiritual successors because if it was other actual successors, we'd get a lawsuit slapped on it.
Yeah.
They're in the spirit of Quest for Glory.
So you can see the character behind us if you raise the camera a bit. That's our road to redemption.
Yeah, that's Sean O'Connor from Hero U. And he is the equivalent of the thief character in Quest for Glory.
So
we actually had people quit the team because they said, you can't be a thief and a hero. I refuse to work on this.
we wanted to prove, you can be a thief and a hero.
Yes, you can be a thief and a hero.
And
that's what Sean O'Connor is in Hero U Road to Redemption. And new storytelling games called Summer. It was originally Summer Days at Hero U, and I shortened the title to Summer Days Tilly's Tale. She's now working on Summer Days Efeo's Adventure. And those are interactive novels that you play along with the story of those characters. So they're like adventure games. They're light adventure games.
Yeah, they're adventure games without all the movement of things. They're simplified and they're much easier for us to make so that we can actually do it with a minimal team and minimal expenses. Because
so we got back in. We did Hero U Road to Redemption for several reasons. One of which is that over the years we've had hundreds of fans write to us and say, you've got to do another game. We want to see more of this. Another one was we were broke, and we said, making a game might be a good idea. And there's this Kickstarter thing that will give us free money to make a game. And a particular fan in Australia said, I'll make the game for you. You write it, I'll make it. And we discovered none of these things were quite what we thought they were. But except for the fans were always there. So Basically, we made Hero U. We optimistically scheduled, we should have this done in 1.5 to 2 years. It actually took 5.5 years. And indie game making is hard.
Yes, and expensive.
But it's extremely rewarding when you get it done.
Having said that, I'd like to go back a bit. There is a lot of interest, since you mentioned fans wanting you to make another game. There are unofficial remakes of Sierra games, and one of these is Quest for Glory 2 by HD Interactive. You're probably aware of that.
HD stood for Anonymous Game Developers.
Okay.
They didn't want the lawsuit from Sierra.
Because they didn't have the permission.
They didn't have permission to do it. Excuse me just a minute. I need to get that tea out.
Okay. So at any rate, yeah, we were well aware they were making the game. We actually supported them on it. We gave them what resources we could to let them do it. And we applauded them all along the way, that they had the willingness and the energy to be able to keep doing it. And of course, it took them forever to do it. They had turnover. People would lose energy and they weren't going to make any money from it, because Sierra, or the company that now owns Sierra, looked at it and said, you're violating all our terms of, things. And unless you pay us money, you can't do this game. And so they had to make the agreement that they would not make a penny off of this game. And that meant they worked, long hours and for months and years to bring that game out. 10, huh?
It was 10 or 15 years.
Close to 10 years to make that game, and they didn't get a penny out of it. What they did get was the ability to make their own games after that. But they made a brilliant job of it. It's just great. So I really applaud them.
I must say that it's some of these games, which are readily available, of course, I recommend to my students that it's a great start for them to get into the graphic adventure genre, to improve their English, to improve their understanding. And I'm very glad when, not everybody, of course, a small minority, I should say, but I'm very glad when all the students come and say, you convinced us to play that game, and we really like the adventure games, and we're playing them. And that's something that's very cool for me, and really rewarding.
Explicitly educational game. So I did a game called Castle of Dr. Brain that was it didn't have much storytelling in it, but there is a story told in it, and it is a puzzle solving game. And Lori did Mixed Up Fairy Tales, which is a young children's game that teaches you how to read. And unfortunately, that one really needed to have voices in it, but that was too early for Sarah. Was not doing voices back then. And I was the the program manager for EcoQuest, which is the third educational game that was done at that time. So yeah, Sierra did really go after the educational game market as well as adventure games, and with us role playing.
At the same time, they really hated companies that created the edutainment, let's say, games.
Well, they actually, at that time, we were inheriting them. We were actually going out to take some of those companies and bring them under the Sierra label. So we took one of the bigger children's games producers and talked about. Yeah, Broderbund didn't come, did they? They kept theirs.
There's Broderbund and Davidson and Associates, and eventually with the big merger when Sierra got bought out by CUC and became Sendent, they also acquired Davidson at the same time.
Yeah.
And all the managers of these companies, all the executives talked to each other. So Ken was kind of friends with the people at Davidson, and He knew the brothers from Broderbund. So all the companies were very close. We worked with Ron Gilbert from LucasArts, who did Secret of Monkey Island, and he said that he had borrowed some of the things we did in Heroes Quest to put in Secret of Monkey Island, and we borrowed some things he did in Monkey Island to put into Quest for Glory 2. So,
that's
back and forth. We're all friends.
Well, Ron Gilbert is one of the most amazing talents we've got in this industry, and I had the opportunity to interview him sometime, I think, the previous year. And David Fox, of course, who worked with him on the Monkey Island games and on the Jack McCracken, one of the funniest games ever released. Since we're talking about other developers, may I ask what games from other developers outside Sierra do you think are inspirational or you really, really like?
Well, the greatest adventure game written, as at least in the early days to us, was Secret of Monkey Island.
Because
It's just brilliant. It's humorous. It's funny. There's no death except for the one intentional death scene that you really have to work to get, and it is all about funny storytelling, but it all ties together. Everything works. It makes sense together. So that's a brilliant game. We started out in more role-playing games than in adventure. We played Wizardry and Dungeon Master and The Bard's Tale. I didn't play Might and Magic originally, but I later played Heroes of Might and Magic, which I loved. But Dungeon Master is another game that, for the role-playing game, is just absolutely brilliant. And it really, in not too much text, really does tell a story, and that you need to solve through many, many puzzles.
From the adventure game era of our time, the best adventure games for us were usually the LucasArts games.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yes, that was the best indie game. I mean, it was almost better than some of the movies in a lot of cases. And of course, and
Fate of Atlantis.
And what was the music game?
Oh, Loom.
Loom.
Yeah,
Loom was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're other than that, the only games that we play right now are World of Warcraft. So therefore, that's
World of Warcraft is all encompassing. There's no time to do anything else when you play that.
Yeah.
But our producer on Heroes Quest was Garuka Singh Khalsa, and he would occasionally bring games in the office and say, "Look at this." And so he introduced us to Loom and to SimCity and to Civilization, all of which were amazing games. Later on, somebody brought in Castle Wolfenstein 3D. That was one of the inspirations for the 3D era at Sierra.
Yeah.
But we really wanted to make a dungeon crawl type game in full 3D, and then Ultima Underworld did a tremendous job of that. So that's a great game. So yeah, there's a lot of amazing work out there. This is of course that's all ancient stuff, but there's some really nice modern games too. That anything from Wajidai, that's the Blackwell Chronicles, and latest, more recent one is Unavowed. Those are really good games. We haven't really played. There have been a number of strong European adventure games in the 2010s, like the Longest Journey and Broken Sword. But we haven't played those ourselves.
Yeah.
So the Longest Journey, I think that's one of the greatest graphic adventures ever released. It was huge for us. Of course, from the 80s, some of my favorite games, which were text-based adventures, were from Magnetic Scrolls, like Guild of Thieves, The Pawn, Jinxter. Those were amazing games. But from the
it was a Japanese or Chinese. I think it was a Japanese theme. that was for Magnetic Scrolls. I don't remember exactly, but very very cute game with wonderful Oriental music. And
From Magnetic Scrolls.
yeah, I think it was Magnetic Scrolls.
Magnetic Scrolls, they had released the Fish. I think the Pawn was the first one, if I remember correctly. Guild of Thieves, Jinxter, Corruption.
I think Guild of Thieves.
Okay.
So yeah, we had Atari. So I got into the Atari ST because I had worked for a company that was making professional. We call it desktop publishing now. Back then it was called professional publishing systems. And then I said, we could do these things on personal computers. We don't need these big, mainframe or mid-frame size computers for it. And the company had no interest in that. So I went off and started my own company and got directed to the GEM system. And that in turn led me to the Atari ST, which was one of the first systems to have GEM built into it. And so my first project was a desktop publishing system that never actually quite made it to market, but was the stylist word publisher, we called it. Was going to be the ultimate word processing and desktop publishing system for the ST. And that was relevant only in that that's what got me into Sierra. Sierra needed somebody who knew how to program the Atari ST.
So thank you for desktop publishing then from the Atari ST. That's why they call it the Atari Jagintosh, because it was a cheap alternative to the Mac.
Exactly.
So, yeah, well, that's one sheer luck, one thing leading to the other. So you're there.
That's also, of course, why we discovered Dungeon Master. Is initially that was only on the ST, and that's just an amazing game.
Yes, I remember the first time I loaded Dungeon Master, I was blown away. I mean, the FTL logo schlag. And then you click on the button to open the door, that eerie feeling.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We would play it together and with a friend, and we'd all do this late at night because, people worked. And it was, the lights were down. It would be very creepy because it was one of these that had sounds. You could hear things moving in the distance where you couldn't see them. And then you'd come around the corner and suddenly there was a monster there.
And we would all jump.
And we'd all jump. So it was an experience, not just a game. And that was, these experiences are what we really inspired us to do our games, is to give people that feel, that jump scare occasionally, or that, that's why the monsters will come out of the, that gives you that feeling of adrenaline. And that's, to me, why I like RPGs over adventure games. Adventure games are very cerebral. They're very figure out what's going on. Let's think about what's happening. And adventure and role-playing games are like visceral. I mean, there's this monster, you're fighting for your life. You feel it visually. I mean, your whole heart starts beating and things like that, because that drags you into the game of being there and trying to, stay alive.
And we're talking about the technology. One of the amazing things about Dungeon Master is the entire game fits on a single, I think, 640K.
Yeah.
Not megabyte even, let alone gigabyte. 640K disk. And the company actually had a prototype of the game like 6 months after they started, but it took 2 or 3 years to release it. And at least a year of that was spent on developing new compression technology to be able to squeeze more of the game onto less disk. So that, company actually started out as a technology rather than a game company. They made some of the most amazing writing tools. So they had a crossword puzzle solver and stuff like that. They had a program called the Word Plus that did spell checking, which was kind of non-existent back in that day. And all these other tools for working with words before they even got into games. So FTL Systems was, really a phenomenon.
Yeah, it was, and I think they couldn't repeat that. I mean, I've got the Chaos Strikes Back, and I've got also the Dungeon Master 2 for the Macintosh, but they never managed to get the original game.
Yeah, so it was like they had put out antenna and were struck by lightning for the first game, and and put it into a bottle, and they couldn't fit the lightning into the bottle for the other games.
Exactly.
They have another games, Sundog, A Frozen Legacy, was also a wonderful Atari ST game at that time from that same company.
Okay.
That's a space exploration.
And yes, Sandok, yes.
Sundog, The Frozen Legacy. Yeah.
If I may move to something else, now we are in the something we're talking about in immersive storytelling. Nowadays we're in the era of generative AI, and we've got AI everywhere. Do you think that's going to affect storytelling?
Oh yeah, it's going to affect a lot of things.
It will affect the art first because tools like Midjourney, take the they're all thieves, of course, but they take some of the best of classic and fantasy art and rework it to give you beautiful background scenes and so on. They're not very consistent. If you give the same prompt to the same program 3 times in a row, you get 3 different images. So it's a little hard to make a consistent game out of it.
But it's getting there. It's really going to be, that all these other companies are going to start using the AI for art. Yeah. And therefore, a lot of artists are really upset right now because they can see it coming. It's just faster.
On the writing side, when ChatGPT came out, everybody I know was amazed at it. And it was like, you could type in a prompt and tell it, tell me a story about a hero in Somalia, and it would crib a little bit from the web pages about Quest for Glory and so on. And it, it read pretty well, but since then I've come to realize that it doesn't actually do a very good job of it. The stories it tells are not original, and generally have a lot of inconsistencies. You might think, they're a little bit like when a primary school student sets out to write a short story. They're imaginative by their standards, and they're fun, but they're not really original. They're not coherent. They don't tell a story from beginning to end. And that's the current state of AI. It's not quite there yet. A lot of people have used AI to try to research. Like my lawyer at one point said it helped him write an article about a particular law and did a really good job. But that was because it could pull directly from web pages with case studies and so on. But what they found since then is somebody trying to do the same thing, and the ChatGPT will, write their article for them, and it will turn out that some of the cases that it quotes are made up. They don't exist.
Yeah, that's true.
So the problem with AI is that it is just a giant parrot. I mean, it is taking all these other people's works and trying to put it together and reinterpret it, but it doesn't have any creativity. But the problem is, that people actually think they can use it that way, but AI really is a tool. I mean,
it can be helpful for starting and prototyping projects.
And for doing art. I mean, as an artist, I use it in my photography work. Right now, the Adobe systems, you can do things like, okay, my photo is here, but I'd like to have gotten a little bit more space on the right. You can have Photoshop's AI suddenly fill that in with the colors that you had on that edge, and it does a fine job.
As if you had taken the picture with a lighter film.
Right. And so as a tool, it's awesome. And I think that when this comes to the more artists will be using it as tools in their backgrounds, tools for animating things, because it can be used as an animator. There's certain AI programs that are doing it. But then AI has been doing, animation for years. We've had most of the animation studios out there, you put in a keyframe, a frame of one movement, and the next movement, the whole thing is to get the computer to extrapolate the movement in between. And we've been using that since, as long as Sierra's been around. Sierra didn't actually use it. You had to draw each position for every animation, but the modern animators in Disney and things like that were using computer graphics basically said, okay, you got an arm reach and you got a base position, just make that arm reach, and the computer would draw all that arm, all, to fill in the movement. And that sort of thing, it's getting more and more sophisticated, and that kind of AI we can use. And it's, it takes all the drudgery out of doing that work.
Yeah, so it has tremendous potential for helping, but it unfortunately also has tremendous potential for putting people out of work.
Yes, and that's the problem. A lot of artists are going to have trouble finding jobs, and and photographers are concerned because you could get the computer to generate a pretty good background, and it's hard to tell. I mean, there were several photo contests where they had to really argue, is this really art or is this really a computer doing it? So it's an issue right now.
I mean, we've always had the thing when we're writing games. So we've got a game that's set in the Greek Isles. We really ought to go there and research it. But we have books, we have movies, we can do a lot of research, and we have computers now. We can do a lot of research into that without ever going there. And AI is the same way. Is you can have the real original source material, or you can have the AI summarize that for you and retell it. And unfortunately, it doesn't always get it right.
Right. It can't tell the right from the wrong. It can't tell the lies. And, this is the internet. Everybody has, there are a lot of lies on the internet. There are a lot of lies on the internet, and it cannot judge. And so, critical thinking right now, one of the most important things to teach people is how to be critically, and how to assess, is this a truth? Is this a lie? Oh, great.
My cat wants to participate.
Oh,
what was it?
It's a cat. He's got his cat on his lap now.
He wants to participate.
Oh, what a beautiful cat.
Yeah, I've got two here. Well, AI is it's tremendous what they can do, and that will make a compelling story for a new game. So how do you get the students to critically think about AI through a video game? Maybe it's about your next game.
What's real and what's not is really important right now, and so and in fact, all of our games, even from the beginning, when you go into the first game, you have you meet a character named Bruno, and he gives you some really bad advice, and you have to judge, do you trust this guy who's standing outside of a town throwing a knife? Is this a person you can trust? And the funny thing was, in adventure games prior to that, they're just storytelling games that went along. People were shocked that Bruno lied to them. They were shocked that this strange guy who's just hanging outside with a knife might not be the most trustworthy person in the world. And so all along all of our game development, all the stories we've told have said, who do you trust? You have to make judgments, because not everybody is your friend in these games. And so we wanted people to think. We wanted people to start to assess what's right, what's wrong, and what's real. And so these type of things are intrinsic in games. You make those decisions. And so that's, I think games are incredibly important, and especially for teaching. And, because one of the things I had in my teaching career in college, they told me, they had a book called Teaching as a Subversive Activity, that teaching is inherently, teaching people to think. And that's kind of subversive, that, when people can think, they can ask questions, they can make decisions for themselves. And that's the sort of thing we really should be teaching, is teach people how to think, how to do, what's real, what's right, is, and how to find out the difference. So,
and that's always the question is it just a game, or is it more than that?
Yes. And all of our games are not just a game. They are an experience.
This is very interesting, and it brings to mind two things. The first is we try to teach our students to think, not what to think. And there's
Yes.
also a saying about students. I mean, clever students know all the right answers, but brilliant students ask all the right questions.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah. And since we're talking about people lying and trusting games, it brings to mind Wing Commander 3, which was a huge game in storytelling, where they had Mark Hamill from Star Wars playing the leading character there.
Okay.
And of course, you fight a species, a tiger-like species that's really bringing Earth to the brink of destruction. And one of your mates, one of your comrades, let's say, is a Kilrathi. And at some point, he double crosses you, and you are shocked because he double crossed you. But when you come to think after that, I mean, you've got the Kilrathi, which are tiger-like, and you've got this guy who's a traitor of his own kind, and then you are shocked that he double crossed you when he already had double crossed his own kind. Okay, but it's brilliant. I mean, the storytelling there, it's brilliant because you really say, okay, this guy is different, but then he's wow.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yes, exactly.
And part of that is the progression in fantasy literature that when Robert Heinlein wrote Starship Troopers, the enemy were the bugs, and for the most part, okay, well, they're nasty. We'll just destroy them. Although there were some things in there where they had some places that we were trying to do non-destructive weapons against, and to get not actually hurt people. But later on, you have Orson Scott Card with what's the name of the book now? The very famous one, where they're playing a game, and your character.
Where the kids think they're playing a game, but they're really going out, being used to destroy a space-going race.
Yeah. So the Earth has been at war with this other race, and they're using the kids because they're faster reflexes to play the game that is actually controlling the remote spaceships. And then the later books, Scott Card explored whether that was actually a terrible thing that that the generals had made the kids do, that we're actually killing off an intelligent species. So as the literature evolves and the stories evolve, and the games evolve.
There's nuances. It isn't black and white. When we come to the first Star Wars Star Wars universe movies, it's all black and white. You know who the bad guys are. You know who the good guys are. And the problem is, in real life, it's hard to tell the difference. And so therefore, sometimes you need the nuance. You need to learn how to detect nuance. And the fact is, there's very few people are all black or white. Everybody's a mix of stuff, and it's a balance of where their balance is.
And most people think of themselves as heroes in their own minds.
Right.
It's just that their goals are different than ours.
So therefore, critical thinking, right back to that. And the fact is, the other one that's hard to come across initially is the idea that people believe things and they think this is true, and there is nothing that's going to stop them from believing it, even though you experience the same thing and see it from a different point of view and think you're totally wrong. People's way of thinking colors what they saw and what they experienced.
And we can't go too far down that road without angering somebody.
No. No, I'm just saying that people think they're, telling the truth, and you think they're lying, but they believe they are telling the truth. From their point of view, they are telling the truth, and you can't, lie detection devices don't really catch the fact that people believe these things. And so that's why it's very critical to
honest people who are honestly wrong.
Yes. Yeah. To don't take any one source for anything. Look for multiple sources to learn things. and don't learn from one place, because.
And that is the problem with AI and with the internet in general, is that if you look up a controversial topic, you'll get an article on it and say, okay, well, I have to check multiple sources. And you can actually find maybe the top 5 hits on Google. You will suddenly realize that there are 5 different websites, and they are all exactly the same text. They all came from the same place. And if you have something like that, then when you set ChatGPT to look at it, it will, of course, say, oh, this must be true because I see it 5 places. So it will quote you that same thing because it's obviously true because it's been repeated so much. But just because something's been repeated a million times does not mean it's true. It just means that everybody heard it from, somebody started the rumor and everybody else picked it up.
Exactly. Well, this was an amazing opportunity and experience. I'm so glad I could have you both here. I mean, that's incredible.
Hours, I'd cough more because I get a sore throat.
It's okay, no worries. May I ask a final question, Mr. Dory? We don't have many women role models in the industry, the video games industry, unfortunately. And girls in particular, they don't, I mean, if we ask them to name a few game developers, most probably nowadays they're gonna tell us about Shigeru Miyamoto, which is huge, no doubt about it. Maybe they get a couple of European or US names, but they cannot name any women.
Well,
so
they can't name anybody. There's only a few people that get to be stars because companies started to take the idea that maybe they didn't want a game designer name to be above the game. They didn't want to create Hollywood star system that you bought the game because it had Laurie Cole's name on it. Because then if Laurie Cole doesn't stay with the game company, then they can't sell the game anymore. So they wanted to promote this whole idea of the product being the important thing and not the designer. So part of the problem is you will not see very many names. It isn't that there aren't women out there being game designers. In fact, right now, one of the chief game architects for World of Warcraft is Holly Longdale. She is in charge, and she is definitely a woman. And but for most companies, they try to keep the credits down. We had to fight even at Sierra and at Legend Entertainment when we worked for them to get those credits, to get our name on the box for one thing, and to have a credit in the game and in the game manual. And we had to fight for that because game companies do not want stars. They want to be, the company is the thing you buy from, not the product. Not the person who created it. So that's part of the problem. There are women out there creating games. There's probably a lot of them, but I can't name them. But I can't name that many men that are out there creating games, except for the stars that came out of the 80s.
Yes. Sid Meier is the one who comes to mind. That his games were billed as Sid Meier's Pirates, right. Sid Meier's Civilizations.
He put his name there. He branded it.
And he had to start his own company to help do that.
Right.
Sid Meier, Romero from the
Romero.
Yeah.
And we knew Brenda back when she was Brenda Brathwaite working for the company that did the Wizardry games.
Yeah.
So she was initially a play tester there and became a game designer in her own right.
So, yes, women are out there, and so are men, and they're anonymous because game companies don't want to make stars.
One great resource is mobygames.com, MOBY games.com, and you can look up any of your favorite games in there, and it will show you the complete credits list, at least as best as they were able to glean. And so that's one of the ways to find out who made the games you like. And you can also, same thing with, I do this all the time with IMDb as the movie database. Say, okay, I really enjoyed this one star in this movie. And so then you can click on their name and say, oh, here's all the other movies they were in. I might enjoy those too. So Movie Games, very good resource.
Okay.
That's actually how we answer questions about our own games. Yeah. People say, what year did Quest for Glory 4 come out in? And I say, let me look that up. Yeah. It was either 94 and or 95 because it came out twice.
Right. I would like to thank you once again, and I do hope we get the opportunity to talk again. I will send you the draft of the ebook I'm writing, hopefully by the end of the month, so you can give me back any feedback you'd like. And it's gonna be
free the English.
I've been writing it in English because it's easier for me to disseminate this, and also it's easier for my friends who are volunteering their work to translate it to Greek than to get it from Greek and translate it to English. And of course, because this is under a Creative Commons license, it's easier to be translated to other languages. I've done that with an ebook I wrote on AI for education and on Python programming for education, and it gets translated. Both are Creative Commons.
I hope you didn't break too many of your theories on AI for education. When ChatGPT and the other, what was the graphic program that came out?
Besides Midjourney, I don't remember. Yeah.
But it was OpenAI. When those first came out, everyone I knew was all the game developers I knew were all blown away. So this is so amazing. But after a year or two of it, we started to say, it's really good, but it is much more limited than we thought.
Yes, exactly.
It fools you into thinking it's intelligent. It's not there yet, but it is amazing progress over the last 50 years when they were doing the early AI work. So it's getting there.
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank you, and hope to have this conversation again, because we could be talking for the next 10 hours and still got a lot of stuff.
I was going to say, we didn't get to very many of your questions. We like to give long answers.
I think
some other time, yeah.
We got a lot more covered than my initial questions, and I'm really very, very grateful for this. Right. Thank
you very much for having us. We enjoy reminiscing and old people talking about the good old days.
More than importantly is that I appreciate your fact you're a teacher and that you are doing the very thing that I want to encourage. So I encourage you to continue with this, because I do think that we need to reach people. We need to teach people how to think, and games are a great starting point.
And we like to believe our work matters. So
I agree.
You got something out of it.
Right. Thank you a lot, and we'll talk again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.